Hey you guys, welcome to Steele Wars. I'm comedian Steele Saunders and I do love Star Wars, and each week we talk to someone of interest about it, and this week we've got a guest, long time coming, but he is here to talk about his very exciting new project. But I know him, and probably many of you guys know him from his work at Hasbro, and now he's moved on to produce the Star Wars Vintage Collection Archive Edition book. Welcome to Steele Wars, Derryl Depriest. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Steele. Great talking to you again.
Yeah, it's good to catch up. And, you know, I used to listen to like Star Wars Action News, and they'd always have the interviews with you and talking about all the things that you couldn't talk about that was coming up. How long did you work at Hasbro for?
I was at Hasbro for 18 years, so I'm no longer there. So we separated ways last fall, so coming up on a year ago. But I started in 2001, just as Hasbro they were closing the Cincinnati office, what used to be Kenner, and moving the boys division to Rhode Island, and that's exactly when I got my opportunity. I actually started on G.I. Joe, and then after about 4 years there, took a job on the Star Wars team, basically transferred. And that was one of the greatest decisions I ever did. And I ended up being given G.I. Joe back. So I got to manage, both of my favorite brands and a lot more for the better part of 18 years.
The prodigal brand manager.
Brand manager. And then I got promoted and kept going up the chain. So by the time I left, I was vice president of global brand marketing.
Wow.
Which basically it's the business manager of the brand, where you get to work very closely with design, but architect the line basically that all the markets around the world will take, and then you get to make the TV commercials and the website and everything basically involved in marketing a brand.
Being from Australia, I don't collect the Hasbro stuff anymore. I was up until maybe when you got hired. I feel like I might have dipped out, actually. I was Attack of the Clones did it for me. So that I had everything, and in some cases multiples of everything. I had cornered Australia's market on 3 3/4 inch battle droids for a time. I feel like I really scoured that. But it's funny, The Simpsons got me out of Star Wars Hasbro collecting, because around the time of Attack of the Clones, they brought out a Luke Skywalker, and he had the floppy hat from the deleted scene. Yep. And there's that famous episode of The Simpsons where they've got Malibu Stacy, and they bring out the new, like, Lisa Simpson makes this new cool sort of Barbie doll that's going to like educate children. But then it's like Malibu Stacy comes out with a new hat, and it's like, but it's got a new hat. And Seymour Skinner pushes all the little girls out of the way to get his doll. And I remember being in a Target and just like going, it's got a new hat.
It's got a new hat.
My lifestyle's getting mocked on The Simpsons.
Well, that's kind of an existential moment for you, right? And it's funny, for other fans, it's an opportunity. In fact, one of the very last things that I did or on Star Wars at Hasbro was I did a frame-by-frame analysis of Episode 4, A New Hope, to try and find which characters and I was watching the widescreen edition, which characters, even on the widescreen, we had never done before in any line, to try and get those minute, like, droids and Jawas and aliens and, Imperial troops. And believe it or not, there are a good number of them. As a matter of fact, they'll go into the lost or the unmade concepts for the Vintage Collection, one of our chapters in the book. But so what?
Wait. How long does this? Are you doing it in slow motion? Are you pausing?
I was pausing it with every scene, so I wasn't watching the movie to enjoy it. I was watching it for fact-finding research,
like a true Star Wars fan who watches it to enjoy it.
Yeah. And I came up with a solid dozen, characters we could do. None of them were like versions of the main characters. We've done every single version of the main character over and over. As a matter of fact, kind of what you were talking about, which is the floppy hat Luke, that would be like a major variation. We've even done some where, and you probably know, like Darth Vader had a million different like chest panels. Whoever was doing the continuity for his costume back then would be fired today if they made the same errors of continuity. But because of that, it's all these opportunities to change his chest plate and red buttons and green buttons and all this stuff. Who knows what those buttons actually do on his chest, plate, but there exist like a myriad different numbers of variations. Well, we've done them all, and they're all collectible. Yeah.
Well, one of their purposes is to bring out action figure variations, I think.
That's true.
That's true. That's their main purpose. Out of the 12 figures you found, what's your golden boy? Who really needs to get in there?
I think it's there's a people call it the Gonk droid. It's the power droid, that kind of big square droid. It's there's a Lars Homestead version that you see down walking around in the yard. We've still never, Hasbro's still never done that version. They've done several other Gonk droids, but not that kind of signature one. That's probably one of the most important figures that have yet to be done.
Really? Oh, that's weird, because I thought it had been done. Like, I thought, what Gonk droid? So in the vintage Star Wars figures, right?
Yes.
Which Gonk droid is that? Which Gonk droid do I own?
You own, it's just a regular Gonk droid. It's not like the Lars Homestead droid. There's something on his head that makes it unique, because they also have like different things on the kind of on the top of the head. So you own, I think, just kind of a classic Gonk droid. Might be I don't know, in the Jawa scene or something like that. I'm actually, or on the streets of Mos Eisley or something like that. And I hope I'm not getting my story wrong, and it's not the Lars Homestead droid.
I know the one you're talking. It's actually, it's not for sale. It's actually on the homestead. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, yeah. You can see it kind of like down on there's like a down shot, I think.
And he's bigger than the other one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. And they're different sizes. But so all of the characters that I was teeing up would have made an interesting wave of characters, but they were all pretty obscure, and they're not for the kind of casual fan. They're for the deeper fan. But I think that's what the vintage line is about anyway. It's for the,
So is your project, you're going to bring out all 12 in the same case? That's gutsy.
So we were looking at, this is part of one of the chapters. We were looking at, and I was asked by Hasbro even after I had left the Star Wars team, if we were to, restart vintage, which they did, what do you have a set of figures that you think should comprise the line? And given that that's the last thing that I was researching before I left the Star Wars team, I pulled those out. I had screenshots and I provided them to the team. And ultimately, they probably thought it was a little too obscure to relaunch the line, or very obscure. So ultimately, they didn't choose an episode 4 kind of theme to rally around. They went with the new movies, which was the better choice. But my desire, and the way I always like to architect a line is, each wave, I wanted to have a theme to center around, which allowed us to put in some A-level characters and B and C-level characters to kind of complete the theme, to give something for the casual fan and the core fan, the deep fan to rally around.
Yeah. What's the official, able to be said reason that those Tonka twins have never been action figures?
Well, that's really a question, I think, for Lucasfilm. But I'm trying to remember back.
As soon as you pull that face, I'm like, I'm not getting an answer. That is the, like, you don't work there anymore, but you've still got the classic Hasbro, I'm not going to answer your question properly. I know that look.
Well, I still work with the people at Lucasfilm. I want them to, talk in the book and everything, so I can't do anything to kind of piss them off. But
they've gotten to him.
That actually, Steele, you're asking probably one of the number one questions we had from fans, because we would do, you may not have been collecting 3 3/4 in the time as much deeply as when I was there. We used to do every year a fan poll to ask fans, what figure do you want to see made that has yet to be made in the line? And then we would work that character in the line, and it would appear a year or two later, because that's how long it takes to make toys. We said right away, do not put the Tonica sisters on this list, because if it is voted number 1, we'll just ignore that and we'll go to the number 2. So don't waste your vote. Actually vote for a figure that we would make. And it was one of those figures, and there are very few that are on that can never be made list for reasons that, I really can't talk about. So I still won't reveal Lucasfilm's secrets. So, but those are the reasons, those are the things we can't talk about even today.
See, this is what gets me about this whole Star Wars media thing. There's YouTube and there's countless YouTube videos about Star Wars. Some of them better than others. Half of them should be about theories why those two sisters are. I just want to hear just as many I want all the episode 9 theorists just to be making up crazy conspiracy theory videos about why these two girls are not to be made.
Yeah.
One day. That should have been your stretch goal in your Kickstarter. If you got a million books sold, though, you'd reveal the in a sealed section.
Reveal the secret.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Interesting.
But I don't have a price on that, Steele.
Okay.
Ethically, I won't cross that boundary. I can't be bought. Well, there is no price.
As the $1 Million Man once said, everyone has a price. Okay.
I think a hitman will come after me if that happens. Maybe not under the current Disney leadership. But anyway.
Bob Iger
We digress.
Bob Iger seemingly has taken a anti-hitman status with his running of the company, and we applaud him for it. Now, let's go back to the beginning and talk about Star Wars a little bit. What is your first memory of Star Wars?
My very first memory, I remember the day I saw Star Wars back in 1977. It wasn't the first showing. It wasn't in May. I think I went to a friend's birthday party. I want to say it was early July or something like that. It's one of those movies where still, weeks and weeks after it came out, the lines were huge. And I remember where we stood in line in the parking lot. I grew up in San Diego. So it was a sunny day, a beautiful day. I remember the theater. I remember the line. I remember everything about the movie, the experience where I sat in the theater. I don't remember who I went with. I just remember, kind of the me part of it, my sensory experience of that day.
I went with Han and Luke. Well, it's funny. It's you went to the spiritual home of nerd lines, San Diego. That's
true. I grew up in San Diego. I went to my first Comic-Con in 1976. So
that was the Star Wars Comic-Con. That was the first.
That was the very first one. It was there. And I wish I could say I have vivid memories of seeing who was there? Was it Charles Lippincott who was there?
Yeah.
At Comic-Con with a table full of posters. I wish I could say I could remember that. But I was actually looking for comic books. But I vaguely remember a table that didn't have comic books, and somebody was there and there were posters, but I don't know the content. So I think I know exactly where in the room they were. But I didn't get, one of the posters, or I didn't talk to the guy who was manning it, but I did see the movie a little bit later.
What exclusives did you pick up at that San Diego Comic-Con?
Oh, at that one. Yeah. It wasn't quite.
What did Gentle Giant have on offer?
Yeah, exactly. It was a very different experience. That was in the basement of a small hotel called the El Cortez Hotel, which is actually, it's still there in San Diego. It's a round hotel. The basement wasn't round, but the hotel is. And it was so small, and kind of they laughed. There was a red velvet rope outside. And when me and my 2 younger brothers, I have a brother, so I was 10, I would have had an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old brother. We all went to the Comic-Con. Our dad took us. We were so young, they just let us in for free. They're like, oh, you guys are into comics here. And they lifted the rope and let us walk in. We felt like kings,
Yes.
coming into this place. And it was all adults, pretty much. There really weren't any kids there. And back then, it was heavy duty comics everywhere. People really weren't selling, toys, or at least not that I'm aware of. But that was a different experience. I've pretty much been to every venue that it's been at since then. I think since '76, I've missed maybe 4 to 5 Comic Cons. I just broke a streak of 25 years in a row. I didn't go last year, and I won't go this year either. So It's kind of a relief. It's gotten so big.
That's what we love about it. That's what we love about it. When you first saw it, how did it hit you? You're into comic books already. You're hanging out at Comic Con. How did you? What were you, a changed little boy walking out of that cinema?
I was changed the moment the film started. So when the Star Destroyer came overhead, then, this is what so many people talk about, their memories, their indelible memories of Star Wars. They knew things were different as soon as, Leia's Corellian fighters, chased, and that's cool, but it's shooting back at something. Well, what's it shooting at? And then you find out it just fills the screen. That was indelible. And I knew that was an amazing moment. But it wasn't until the cantina that I was just completely transported to this universe. The cantina scene for me was it. That was what Star Wars about. This well lived in hive of scum and villainy felt so real, and a place you could really feel, a universe you feel like you could belong in. Luke is my favorite character. I love Luke because of the heroic qualities, but also because when I was 10 and I saw the movie, I thought, yes, the Force is this thing that, I could have it in me. It's kind of like, it's like Harry Potter is to a generation of kids today, right? You could believe you could be in that world and you could be the hero. So all of these things, this magic world, so well constructed, so believably real, yet alien, with heroic aspirations, it was like the perfect movie for me at that age, and life was different then.
So when the cantina scene comes on, right, and there's a Devorian, the vampire looking guy, there's Muftek and Cave, there's Snaggletooth, there's all these different creatures, and you're taking them all in, and then it pans over to these two ladies, and as a 10-year-old, you're like, I'm never going to tell anyone why there's not toys of these figures. Like, that's how you became a changed man, with your secrets.
Exactly.
Your little secrets about your twins. Are they twins or are they just sisters?
They're sisters.
All
No,
right.
they're twins. They're twins. I think in the expanded universe storytelling, they were twins.
All right.
There
Well,
was something about that. There were in some stories somewhere.
at least I got you to answer one question about them. So I feel
exactly.
I feel like my journalism cap is blazing. So Luke Skywalker was your guy, who I'm a devout Luke Skywalker. Like I said, like he was my avatar in the film. Like when he pointed to the light on the Millennium Falcon and Han Solo's just like, shut up. I was like, I think he's got a right to know why that light. I would ask about the light. Like, I feel that's a fair question, Han Solo. You need to chill out. Could be his first spaceship. But how did you, like, how have you found Luke's evolution throughout the sequel trilogy?
Well, I was disappointed with The Last Jedi, but I've come to terms with it. I personally feel that Luke isn't somebody who, in the face of tremendous adversity, would just kind of like fold up his tent like a petulant baby and, just run away to a rock. I feel like he'd be someone who dealt with the situation. For case in point for me, when he found out that Kylo Ren was being manipulated by this guy named Snoke, isn't Snoke the bigger problem? And shouldn't you be dealing with that isn't that the bigger evil in the galaxy rather than, just.
I find that really interesting as far, like how it's been left so vague is like, when Leia very awkwardly says the word Snoke in The Force Awakens, like there's a Snoke got to him or what. And it's like, did you know him? Like, would he walk past? Like, how do you know?
Yeah.
Like, what was your interaction pre Kylo Ren? But I had other hopes for The Last Jedi. What would happen to Luke? Most of them revolved around him doing the same thing he did in the 80s. But now, like, I was like, I want Sail Barge Part 2. I want him to levitate the X-Wing. I just want him to do all this. Like I don't have like an imagination, but I'm good at remixes. So that's what I wanted. But I liked how he was an inspiration still. Like the end scene with the broom boy and stuff. Like, I found that because I felt like he was my inspiration when I was a little kid, and I would sort of try to interact with people in a Luke Skywalker fashion, like how he would put down the lightsaber and all that sort of stuff. But as far as going away to his little rock and hiding, look at his mentors.
Yeah. 2
notorious hiders. They are known for their seclusion. So
that is an excellent point. That is true. So actually, he's just following his lineage there.
Yeah. Oh, it turns out 2 years of debating on Twitter pays off.
Yeah, it does. Although they had, you might argue, for preservation of the important teachings yet to come. So that's the thing. Maybe there is something there, but I've come to terms with it. So I like, how you said it. Luke's symbology lives on in the galaxy, and the title of this upcoming film is very interesting too. The Rise of Skywalker. What does that mean, right? Are we all Skywalker? Are we all kind of looking to the stars and saying, we're all inspired by that, and we're all, kind of that family. Or is Skywalker a singular person? Is it a movement?
Yeah. I like it because, and I hope after the film as well, we can, like Return of the Jedi, I really like, because after you see the film, you can debate what the title of the film meant. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right.
Was it talking about Anakin Skywalker coming back? Was it talking about Luke? Was it talking about the Jedi in general? Like,
right.
I sort of like the slight, ambiguity to it. And, I hope the Rise of Skywalker has, like, afterwards you can go, were they talking about this or that? Oh, either. It's like that GIF on Twitter. It's like, why not both?
Yeah,
that's what I like. But when I find it very interesting the way in Star Wars fandom, I sort of, I don't know. I feel like I maybe follow it differently to some people in that I like seeing how people react to things that they do and they don't like. Do you know what I mean? And I'm wondering, like, after seeing The Last Jedi and the reaction to it, it's made me softer on the things that I didn't like in the prequels, say. Because it's sort of like, this is, to get this worked up over space movie is crazy. Do you know what I mean? So I'm wondering if your not liking of the film, did it make you think back to, I'm sure that you've encountered some angry toy fans that were just, they couldn't believe that you did that belt buckle on that figure or something like that. Did that, like, being on both sides of the fan fence?
Yeah, so we see that. So the good thing is that we've got things that we're passionate about, that we talk about all the time. You've got a weekly show about it. I made a good career about it. But at the same time, when you're dealing with passionate fans who have a deep emotional investment in something, the reaction they have sometimes can be very strong, even over minor things. And it can be, minor things that you might, the films are kind of a major thing because that is the source of everything. But then even toys do upset people. They sometimes upset people for the things we don't make. When I was at Hasbro, I encountered plenty of fans, and I love talking to fans at Comic-Con, but you could tell that they had some frustrations when, they couldn't find figures at retail, when they wouldn't do the figures they've been asking us to do for years. And there's a sense of, anger, sometimes polite, more polite, less polite, but it's almost we can coin a term here, Steele. People can get fangry. They can get fangry when, they don't like the way the movie turned out, or the way Game of Thrones ended, or why they can't find, action figures at retail. These are reactions to, kind of irrational problems to have, right? About, fantasy worlds and things you collect, but fangry.
It is weird that you like something so much that you get angry about it. Like
yeah.
It's like, I am furious that I like Star Wars toys so much that I can't buy any more. Can you please make some more for me to buy? I cannot find them. But what was out of all all the complaints about, stuff that the toy line did, what was the one where you're like, oh, all right then. Okay. That's a complaint.
The complaints.
Yeah.
There were a lot. There were quite a few complaints. In fact, one thing I used to do, I used to actually personally we used to have a weekly Q&A with websites where we invited the sites to send in
that. I love the
questions.
Q&A.
I actually loved writing them. And I think of the close to 1,500 questions that we actually did over the course of a number of years. I think I wrote personally all of them, but maybe a couple of dozen. So I really took it on myself to actually answer these, because I wanted fans to have an honest response, and I wanted fans to understand how basically Hasbro is a corporation. As much as, we were fans on the team at the time, but there are business principles behind it. But the best thing to come out of those Q&As were a general awareness, because I couldn't read every message board and I couldn't see everything. It was a way to bubble up the biggest common causes. And you saw that in the questions that were repeated week on week. It was the questions that were submitted by multiple fan sites that I could answer all at the same time. And mostly they were questions about availability. How come I can't find this or that? But it was also questions about figures that should be re-released, or significant ones that needed an update, or making us aware of figures that had yet to be done. And kind of one of those questions led to, we did a figure in the vintage collection, a Cantina alien. So back to our, my favorite things. It's a Cantina alien named Bomb Vinden. And I don't know if you know this guy, but he's got kind of a white head with a horn in the middle of the head. Yeah. Two black eyes. Really cool looking guy. I mean, not outrageous. He's not like the Deveronian with, two horns and a devil grin, but he's still a super cool, iconic alien. Well, my design partner, Brian Parrish, and I had always assumed that we hadn't done Bomb Vinden. Like, this guy existed in the line for years. And I think it wasn't until one of the Q&As from the fan sites that came in kind of alerted us to, they said, hey, how come you guys haven't done a Bomb Vinden? And I looked at Brian and I said, haven't we? And then we looked, and then we combed all the archives. We had never done this guy. So it was fans alerting us to the fact that there was this still significant character that we hadn't done that kind of triggered that impulse. So, that Q&A was great for that, but it was also great for inspiring the re-releases that we would do. And basically it became we took that cue, we formed a whole line called Saga Legends, which were just designed to re-release the fan favorites that people couldn't find anymore. Specific sand troopers and specific droids and high demand characters like that. But Boba Fett, people couldn't find him. So, the fans were instrumental in guiding us. And that was the most, important thing. It was truly collaborative between the fans and us, from that standpoint.
So what was your path from, you see the film, and then in 2001, you're working at Hasbro under G.I. Joe. What do you have to do in between that time to get a job at a toy company? That's where do I need to go? Who do I need to get to teach me to do something?
Well, I'm a perfect example. So I was actually before. Let me take you back to the earliest parts of my career. After I graduated from university, so I graduated from UC San Diego with degrees in biology and psychology. I went right to graduate school. So I went to work on a PhD in neuroscience. That's what I wanted to do. I thought I would be a scientist at a research university with my own lab, conducting experiments, and I was really interested in vision, like how the brain processes vision. So I had, I envisioned my career being in science. I'd be a scientist. And then it was during graduate school that I realized I wasn't as passionate about that field as you really needed to be. And I started on the side. I started collecting toys and reacquiring GI Joe, and then collecting Star Wars and GI Joe again. And I kind of said, and I used to go to the toy stores all the time, and this is in the late 80s and early part of the 90s. And I said, wow, this is such a fun field. How do I get a job in toys? And I decided then that I would switch. So after 5 years, I left school, but I didn't get my doctorate. I have a master's in neuroscience. That's my degree. It's not in marketing. It's in neuroscience, brain research, basically.
Some would argue it's the same thing, but
exactly right. Well, it's a little bit. There's research involved, which has always served me well, in my career. But my career-defining advice, the thing that really pointed me in a direction that I've paid forward to this day, is I actually called Hasbro. I sent them a note. I said, hey, I'm a big G.I. Joe fan. You guys make G.I. Joe. How do I work for you on G.I. Joe? Right, this would be my dream job. This was in around 1991, something like that. I actually got a call back, believe it or not. Hasbro called back and says, and they said, hey, we read your letter. We looked at your pictures of your collection that you sent and everything fans do. And they say, we want to talk to you. What do you want to do? Tell us this. And they gave me about a half an hour of their time. It was a guy named Vinny DeLiva there, who was at Hasbro, who was a director then. Now Vinny's, he runs Tomy International. But Vinny basically said, listen to me. He said, look, you don't have any experience. I can't hire you. What I recommend is, if you're serious about being in toys, go into marketing, do anything, get any job in marketing, just start changing, change your career, start marketing, and then get some years of experience. Then we can talk again. And that's exactly what I did. I said, okay, that's great advice. It sounds like, marketing is for me, based on everything that Vinny talked about. That was career defining advice. And basically I was very lucky after the science school. I got a job at Atari Games in the Bay Area. Ooh. And making video games. It's like, I talk about landing in a super lucky spot. Kind of, I don't want to say I talked my way in there, but I do understand, video games. And then really I've only ever had 2 jobs. So it was the video game job, Midway bought Atari, and then I spent almost 9 years there, and then Hasbro. So kind of my career advice to people who always want to get into, especially, in marketing in the toy industry, and I've talked to a lot of people, it's, if you don't have marketing experience, just get it. Right? Just go get it. Especially nowadays, digital marketing. It's all about digital. It's about social. It's about understanding those platforms. And you can come from a non-marketing background and be very successful if your intuition and passion are in the right place. So, passion is another thing that I always look for. So, but right before I came to Hasbro, I did write a book on the 12-inch G.I. Joe line, which is the other line I grew up in. My childhood kind of spanned the 12-inch G.I. Joe of the mid 1970s all the way to, Star Wars 3 3/4 up until about 1980. So those defined my childhood. So I wrote that book. That also caught the attention of Hasbro. But 8 years later, they called me and offered me a job. So that's kind of my career arc.
Independently produced podcasts like Steele Wars survive off listener word of mouth. Listeners or viewers just like you. If you're on Twitter or Facebook, the latest episode is always pinned to the top of our feeds at Steele Wars, and if you're watching on YouTube, of course. Hitting like and subscribing apparently helps us out. And the classic request, if you're on iTunes, please leave us a sweet 5-star review, as it bumps us up the rankings and lets other potential listeners know that we're doing good stuff. So if you want more podcasts, more enhanced podcasts, and just generally more content, please pod it forward. Thanks so much, and now back to the show. So how deep was your G.I. Joe collection?
It's very deep, and to this day, I have a complete, 12-inch G.I. Joe collection of that era. As a matter of fact, I try to be complete on G.I. Joe for all 12-inch figures of all time, including the line that I managed again when I came to Hasbro. And I have all the 3 3/4 figures as well, and I have a complete Star Wars 3 3/4 collection. So, and I've got a lot more action figures than that too. So,
you've got a complete Star Wars 3 3/4 collection.
Yeah, complete. Everything loose, and I'm no longer a modern package collector. I collect loose, but when it comes to vintage, I'm nearly complete. There's some vehicles I'm still missing boxed, but I have everything loose. Yeah, 3 3/4 is my jam. I love it. It's such a phenomenal scale.
How many figures have there been?
Oh, that's a great question. Don't know exactly, but it's in the thousands. If you count all the variations of the figures, it's pushing probably 2,000. It might even be more than that now. For Star Wars, that is. G.I. Joe has almost the same. It's just a staggering number of variants. Both of these lines are just massive.
Because I sort of, when there was the hat incident, and I'm out. And what sort of bugged me, I've got this, I'm plagued by having a light OCD and being very messy, which are very conflicting things. But it annoyed me that, so when they announced they were going to bring out these figures again, right, in 1996 or whenever it was, the Power of the Force 2, I, in my head, was like, they will just bring out the best version of this figure and that'll be it. Like, and then we'll move on and they'll do other figures. Do you know what I mean? And then they came out and they were all like He-Man'd up, and then, over time they'd bring out the then there'd be like this Jedi Luke 5 Lukes later, and you're like, this is the best Jedi Luke ever. Why didn't they bring it out 5 Lukes ago? Because I just wanted the best version of each one. And that's when I just went, I'm just going to get the vintage ones now because they're not going to make any more. Little did I know. But I just couldn't, I sort of, in some ways how they did the Kenner one, how they never updated them, although they did the droids, it appeals to me. But I sort of, it really bugged me that they just kept bringing out the same, because I just wanted the one, I'd have maybe one in a setup, a diorama, and then I'd have one there, and then they'd bring out another Tatooine Luke that I didn't need for any of my dioramas or rows.
Yep.
But you just say don't buy it. But that's not how, I'm all or not, I have to have one of something.
Yep.
Or the lot of something. And that's,
I'm a completist too. I'm the same way. I have to have them all, even if, as painful as it is, if the sculpt isn't that great or if it has diminished articulation, I still have to have it if it's in the scale. But that's that's what I signed up for. Actually, there's one collection I just recently shut off. I also collect DC Direct superhero figures. Mm-hmm. And DC finally tested my patience because they produced the umpteenth Supergirl or Superman or whatever it was, and the waves are starting to become indistinct from each other. They're just recycling the same characters. They're not doing new characters. And I figured it was enough. And once that kind of bubble bursts, I'm out. I don't need another one unless they do a totally new figure, but I don't need 50 different versions of Superman, which is pretty much what they've done over time. And what you're describing is not atypical for a lot of fans. And that's the reason why Star Wars, the Black Series, the 6-inch series exists, is because there were so many fans. Back to your original question, Steele, is how many Star Wars 3 3/4 figures are there? There are thousands. It's an intimidating number. And if you intend to be complete or even to get the signature one, what you learn is that, they may not have created the signature one yet, right? The vintage collection actually was our answer to that. It's like it's our definitive version of that character that should never be duplicated or topped. It's as good as it's going to get for 3 3/4. And I think that's held true. I think there's very few examples in the vintage collection where that figure couldn't be, needs to be updated in a significant way. So I'll say it's the definitive version. But to a lot of fans, the 3 3/4 scale is just so intimidating. Where do you start? And there's so many vehicles too. Do I just get figures? Do I just get vehicles? So that's why when the 6-inch line, when we launched that, we knew that we were going to get a lot of what we call lapsed fans back into collecting again, because it's a way to start over again. It's a safe way to start. You don't have to worry about everything that went before. You feel like you're on the ground floor, something new. And that turned out to be true. That was a huge kind of a watershed moment, in collecting when we did that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I got out at a very good time, because that whole Clone Wars era was like, I see people's collections, like people tweet their collection and it's like, there's gunships and it's like insane. Yep. But there's like, you guys in like that sort of pre Force Awakens era, just, oh my God, just pumping out just bangers. And I would sort of listen to the Star Wars Action News podcast. I thought, I'll just listen to these guys talk about what they bought, and I'll go have a look in the shop, but I'll live vicariously through other people. It's far cheaper. They give these podcasts away for free. The business model's terrible. Yeah, like some of that, like when do you think Star Wars action figure collectors were the happiest in your time in working with the line?
So when we were doing, I think we did a line called the Star Wars the 30th anniversary that had the coins. We brought back those aluminum coins, Power of the Force coins. So this was in, I want to say 2007 we started this, and it was so successful it ran for a couple years. It ran for actually longer than we originally envisioned. So typically a line would last a year, and then we look for like the new wrap, the new interesting thing. The coins were so powerful, we actually extended that, and we burst through this binder we made to collect those coins. We did so many of them, but that led into the launch of the Clone Wars in 2008. And I would say those kind of years, 2007 to 2009 or 10, were probably the best years for Star Wars. I think the fans were happiest. There was new entertainment. The Clone Wars was exciting and new. We were putting out the big new vehicles, the new Millennium Falcon we were able to do because the business was so good. Brand new giant scale AT-AT. Republic gunships galore. And we were able to do things like the Build-A-Droid line in what we called the Legacy Collection, where we were giving parts of droids. Those years, to me, I look back on them, they were unbelievable years. They were so fun to work on with the team, and fans seemed so genuinely happy that, I lump all those years and those lines all together, because truly it was a golden time, I think, for fans.
When you brought out that big Millennium Falcon, I was like, probably should have got that Luke with the hat. I probably should have kept it with I can't just get the Falcon, because that's going to ruin my my neuroses. But
yes,
I was like, oh, that is like... It makes it fun to go to friends' houses that have, got that stuff, because it's like I'm so familiar with like the vintage stuff and the sort of like the Phantom Menace backwards stuff that like to see like those toys and stuff. And even walking around Celebration this year, I was like, oh my God, they made that real. Like I thought I was like pretty on it, like, and I was like, oh my God, they made that Alien or that 3-pack or whatever like that.
Yep. There's so much stuff. There's so many things that we were able to do. And one of the things actually I'm particularly proud of is the service we gave. You talked about being one of the foremost collectors in Australia, battle droids during your time, right? So what?
That's
actually,
not an official title. I don't want people. I don't want some dude in Darwin to go like, oh, I've got 3,000 battle droids, buddy. You need to shut up.
I think we need a battle droid showdown, Steele. You can own this. You can take him. But one thing that we did in Clone Wars was we did a lot of service, of course, to the clones. But what are clones without their battle droids? The Clone Wars did a great job, and Dave Filoni and his team did such a great job of making new vehicles for the droid army, that every time there was a great new vehicle, we worked it into the line. And you kind of look back now, and it's unbelievable how many droid vehicles we made, and droid gunships, and these octo droids, and all kinds of crazy things that I'm so glad exist because of Clone Wars. But you kind of look back and go, wow, we did that many things just for those droids. It's kind of ridiculous. It also begs a philosophical question, like, is a droid gunship an actual droid itself, or is it piloted by droids? Because it shouldn't need to be piloted by droids.
No. That's the sort of question that makes Star Wars fall apart. You just
okay, all right, we'll skip that.
You're gonna ruin.
Pretend that didn't happen.
A lot of my life with those sort of questions. Why do you need a droid on a droid? Well, that's like Battlestar Galactica got around that by they just put they made the ship the creature sort of thing. They got around that, but not as toyetic as they like to say.
Oh, definitely not.
Around your parts. I'm interested about this because obviously you did a lot of research into the fans and stuff, and they brought out the Hasbro the barge, the sail barge,
sail barge.
How many times did you get close to making that?
Never.
Okay.
In my time. So let me set the record straight. I was not on the Star Wars team or over Star Wars when they decided to launch the HasLab sail barge campaign. I was on the side. They consulted me, and so I had some input to it, but it wasn't the decision making. My advice to them was, this is a vehicle that we would never ever make if we had to rely on traditional retail. And in fact, this was something that fans asked about on the Q&As. Will you ever do a sail barge? Categorically, I said no. I'm not even going to offer a glimmer of hope that we could do this. But this was back in the days before you had crowdfunding, right? Basically, that vehicle exists solely because of crowdfunding exercises. No retailer would ever touch that. They wouldn't take the product commitment. So I didn't even harbor any hope that you could see a vehicle like that. So my hat's off to the team that spearheaded that, to recognize that the conventions of today that allow you to go directly to fans for a product like that, because that would not have existed. It obviously didn't exist, and it was never even a possibility, in the 10 years that I headed up the line, just because I didn't want to break any hearts. I didn't want to get people's hopes up. That was always a thing. Being a fan myself, the last thing I want to do is promise something that can't be delivered. And so I was always very, more pragmatic in that, not even getting people's hopes up. I always said, we'll look into it. If there's a way we can do it, we will. So
yeah, that was the other thing that's made me I was like, ooh, wish I was collecting for the barge and that big Falcon.
But let me tell you, there is a set that I did with there's a designer named Brian Merton, who's now at Lucasfilm. So he runs the collectible licensing at Lucasfilm. So Brian Merton was my design partner, and he designed, and I marketed, we created together a Pit of Carcoon set for, years ago. This was probably back in, I want to say maybe 2010, 2011, that actually has, all the tentacles. It's got a sand-shaped kind of thing. We said, the plastic inside that usually holds a toy up, like it's called the inner blister. We said, what if we could do that sand thing that we would normally, like, instead of doing it in clear, we shot it in tan, and it's like a part of a diorama. And then we did the Pit of Carcoon, all those, the tentacles from the Sarlacc pit. I'm so glad. And so we did this set, and it had the not the sand skiff, like the Jabba's skiff out there, and it had a Luke and stuff in it.
I'm very familiar with it.
So I'm so glad this thing exists because now I can take that and put it underneath the barge, and I've got the pit of Carcoon to go with the barge. So
Oh,
my thanks to the Hasbro team for helping me, complete something that was, unbelievable. But now it goes with my Sarlacc pit. I'm so
yeah.
happy.
I was a bit dirty on how the timing with the sail barge worked out, that we didn't get at Comic-Con like the ultimate sail barge diorama, like that. Look, that's my favorite scene. I was just like, that'd be so. So I'm leaving it up to the fans. I know they'll come through, and I'll see a guy that's ruined half his house with this giant Tatooine diorama, and it will be the best.
That's right.
Now, so you did a lot of, obviously you would have done a lot of research. Now, the Hasbro barge comes out, and I think it sold 8,000, in that range. Let's round it to that. So by definition, there is no more than 8,000 Star Wars completionists on the planet. How different was that in the 2000s to your knowledge?
Well, I can't give you exact quantities, but so 2008 was also a tough year for fans because we had the economic meltdown, right? So I always look at my time on Star Wars as pre 2008 and then post 2008 in terms of like the number that we could release of the most obscure character in the line, and those numbers changed drastically. So in 2007, going into 2008, before the whole meltdown, we had the number was actually very large of aliens that we could ship around the globe. And I say aliens, I used Cantina aliens as a benchmark, because they're about the most obscure thing you can get. Jabba's henchmen, because no kid is going to really want those or recognize those as a main character. So I always said those are going to core fans. They were pretty substantial numbers, and they've never recovered. So, but then again, we also had a disparity in the 10 years that I was over the line. Vehicles never sold nearly to the fraction you will think of compared to every figure, in the line. Vehicles are a different animal. So people may collect figures, but they purposefully decide that they're just going to cherry pick or select only certain iconic vehicles to get. They don't get them all because of the space considerations. Mm-hmm. So I don't look at the number of sail barges that were sold necessarily as a reflection of the number of Star Wars, say, completists that are out there, because some people are buying figures, but they're not buying the vehicles, and they are fine with that. They've chosen themselves to live that way. The problem is the characters or the card variations, that come, kind of come with that vehicle, right? But it's not the only place you can get, Yak Face, but I know that. So, there are different numbers between figures and vehicles, but I would say the hobby, the fan base isn't what it was at its height, almost 10 years ago. It's come down, but I think it's also a reflection of what we talked about earlier. At a certain point, 3 3/4 is too big, too intimidating, and it could have marginal returns. Just like you said, why do I need to pay for the floppy hat Luke when I already have a pretty good farm boy Luke? It's like the differentiation of each character is thinner. Now, today we have new movies, right? That's fueling new characters largely. You have less of what we were doing in my time of finding those little differences for each of those characters, those Darth Vader chest panel lights. Nowadays, you really don't need to do that because people just want, there's endless new troopers, in every single film, that can do. There's tons of aliens, more aliens than Hasbro can ever do, in a typical Star Wars film.
Well, that's like the fandom, I think, across the board had to shift when you look at like in the 2000s and the night, like how even like when they were making films, it was every 3 years, so you could deep dive, whether it would be like novels around or comics or figures, like you could really, which I sort of think, I don't know, sometimes people are still in that sort of late 90s mindset of we don't have all the information about this. We don't know. And it's there's no time. It's a different like it was almost sad what we were doing. Like we were just
Yeah.
milking. Like I always look. I don't mean that in a disparaging way, but I always feel bad at Comic-Con. They'll have the Firefly, Serenity. They'll have the meetup for the fans, the brown coats, and you know their big thing for the year will be there's a new comic coming out about Firefly, and Josh is involved, and it's all very exciting. And like that's sort of on a bigger scale, but how it was for Star Wars fans, it's like we're not getting what we actually truly want,
Right.
which is films.
Yes.
So let's write 150 books about what happens after Return of the Jedi, or let's have like let's pay some dude that's meant to be a neurosurgeon or whatever, a neuroscientist, to freeze frame his way through a new.
Well, exactly. And it's interesting. The Firefly fans aren't fangry, right?
No.
They're more resigned. I mean, that's the state of it. Serenity's gone. You know, they're happy with what bits they get. Star Wars fans it's a different matter entirely. You know, with Disney putting, strong screen time behind the films. I mean, look at everything that's coming up on TV. Pretty soon we're going to have a richness of stuff that's unbelievable. You know, Clone Wars is starting up again. Mandalorian's coming out. More series. There's going to be more Star Wars we can wrap our heads around soon. The toys can't keep pace with that. I think the rate of things. It's very different from, you're right, the days when we were chasing expanded universe, comic titles, to do great figures, but obscure figures in the canon.
Like I'd like things just to go a little bit slower, just for him to like. I don't know. I sort of feel like now a film's going to come out and you're going to get 12 figures, and then it's like, I don't know, just like a real token thing. So I like the in-depth thing, but how different is the whole like scope of toys now? Like how hard is it to make money just making toys with the amount of other things? Like people compare Star Wars to how it used to be, and like how much of the aisle it took up, and like Hasbro sort of had the license to themselves before there was like, even like Lego.
Mm-hmm.
And it's changed so much. And then there's, everything else there is for a kid to do. Like how different,
Yes.
Like how amazing is it that toys are still getting made in such quantities now?
Well, it is amazing. My hope is always, I'm a firm believer in the power of play. I think I grew up in an era where imaginative play was everything, and G.I. Joe is, I think, one of the most important toys of all time for that, in just stimulating personal storytelling, where tools were just the medium of fueling that. And I grew up that way with Star Wars too. My hope is always that new generations of kids are inspired in the same way that I grew up. And that, in fact, that's what I did for 18 years at Hasbro. I was inspired by that dream of the things I was making were being played with by kids, creating indelible memories, but also empowering personal storytelling. That was my mantra. In fact, I used to have that written on my whiteboard. This is what we do, right? I always thought that, we talk about STEAM nowadays, the elements of STEAM being so important, where the A is arts, but I would stick an I in there, I STEAM or something like that for imagination. It's such an important attribute. And, it pains me. I recognize that kids aren't playing the same way, that they used to. We know that for a fact. And we're, more kids are spending more time on screens and not out in the yard. But I am inspired just with the sheer number of lightsabers that, we always sold. People are playing them. And when you see kids going out and banging lightsabers, they're imagining themselves in the role of that, of those characters. And that's always a good, I guess, indicator of, the health of a franchise when your role play is selling really well. And I would chalk it up to, Star Wars and Marvel as inspiring, kids to still play characters, even though they may not be playing with, figures as much anymore. And you can tell, I'm not revealing anything about the business. I haven't been over the Star Wars business for a number of years, so I really don't know, anything about the health of it. But you know, you can tell it's not, what it used to be with the number of, pegs devoted to figures anymore. It's not, it's not what it once was. So that, that might tell you that, there aren't as many, kids playing as there used to be. But it's a shame. I really wish it were otherwise. But I'm still heartened by the ones that are, and I certainly dedicated my career to catering to them.
Now, I'm a kid of the vintage era. Those figures to me seem far more playable than the ones now that seem sort of flimsy, and like even the Attack of the Clones. I'm going back to these Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, sure.
Range, right?
Yeah.
But I remember when they came out and they had the magnet spoiler hand that came off for Anakin. But I just sort of noticed that these don't. I think maybe that's something that subconsciously I thought, these don't seem like the ones I loved. They seemed far more.
Yeah.
They just fall over straight away, and
Yep.
Yeah. So do kids? What do kids want?
What do kids want? Well, what you're talking about is a very real problem in that.
Oh, and might I add, is if they don't want what I wanted when I was a kid, they're wrong. Okay, so
They're wrong.
I just want to set the groundwork of this discussion, and it's incredible bias.
But I think you are right in such a way that when we were creating figures and advancing articulation. So that's one thing that we did when I was there. We kind of moved the state of articulation. It wasn't necessarily planned obsolescence, like we're going to put in 2 more points of articulation to a figure to make last year's Clone Wars figure kind of obsolete, so everyone will have to buy into the new one. It wasn't like that. It wasn't in the sense that we always wanted to kind of upgrade and make our figures even more realistic if we could, because it would allow for a greater range of posability. So it's kind of like when you're stepping away from a 5-point articulated figure, like the Kenner figure that we grew up with playing, like imaginatively playing with those figures. If you start to add articulation, what do you really want to achieve with that articulation? The idea is that you can imagine those characters and actually execute them in more realistic poses. So in other words, somewhere between a 5-point articulated figure and an infinitely articulated figure is this continuum where you can maybe never be satisfied with it, depending upon what you want to do with it, or it's something where it fulfills your needs for what you intend to do it for. And I think most kids are over here. They're satisfied with the 5-point articulated figure because they just want to. And you've always seen the classic example of kids just bashing them together. That is how some kids play. Other kids imagine, and they play with it as if they're the field general or actually one of the characters. And they're not necessarily posing it, but rather they're controlling the situation. So that's why when we reintroduced the 5-point articulated figure as kind of an answer to the increasing cost of producing the highly articulated figures, I was emboldened by the knowledge that kids just want to play. Some fans may not like this. Some fans probably will, because it's back to the true nature of what is a toy. It's almost an existential question. What is a Star Wars figure? What is a toy? What's the purpose of it? And design always has that mantra, right? You want to, design it for the intended use that, that your audience is going to have for it. And in that case, you're just giving kids a figure that they can use in their play. They don't need the articulation.
Yeah.
And in fact, when we were starting to do all these super articulated figures right around the Clone Wars era, not Attack of the Clones, but Clone Wars, we were creating these wrist joints that would allow you to pose your blaster in any way. The problem is the corollary of that, you get great articulation, great posability. We're starting to see in the digital millennium amazing photos of people using our Star Wars figures in amazing realistic photos. That's one of the benefits, is the social media use of our figures, both 3 3/4 and Black Series. But on the other hand, moms would write in to consumer affairs at Hasbro saying, my son's hands fell off his figure, what a poor design you have. What can you do about it? And so we used to send out tons of replacement, clones, because the hands would come off so easily as a product of the design, like the way the joint was trapped in the wrist. So on the one hand, we're doing things that satisfy collectors who use them a certain way. On the other hand, we were making things that were over-designed for kids for their intended use, and they couldn't play with them. They were bad toys from that standpoint because they inspired less play.
2008, more kids or adults?
2008 was Clone Wars, and there was an amazing number of kids who came into the brand then. I would say more kids. Kids poured into the franchise because of Clone Wars.
Was there a time when there was more adults?
Prior to episode 1, certainly. I think fans were more driving the bus.
That's that's when they were the best.
Yeah.
I was thinking about it the other day because I just set up behind me my cabinet. We just moved, so I set up my cabinet. I'm very happy. All my vintage figures are stood up, and I have to say, I was looking at a couple of them. Some of them are like Luke Stormtrooper is like, it's one of the most coveted figures, but it is brutal. The man does not own a neck, right? But then you've got figures like Lando, like General Lando, the Lando Skiff Guard, and it's like, I reckon you're done. I reckon like Lando's Skiff Guard is, it's hard to, like, you could add all this stuff, but for me as a kid, it was like, perfect. You've nailed it. It's him.
Perfect figure. Yeah.
Helmet comes off. Got a star.
I agree. And to me, I see both sides of the continuum. I love super articulated figures, but I don't go out and pose them, and I don't have time to do like the dioramas that I really want. But the people who use them are creating gold. They're geniuses. They're creating absolutely unbelievable things. And I'm so proud to have, helped lead the team that, kept pioneering new ways to add joints almost invisibly to make things that are works of art. And, I think so many people are here in this, kind of pop culture, this collecting world, who revere action figures as a form of art. To them, it's a canvas, and it's a usable canvas for people who are using them as like actors in their own, kind of films or storytelling. Action figures are a special type of art for them. So I'm very proud of those. But at the same time, to your point, I think the 5-point articulated figures that Hasbro is doing now fulfill every desire that a kid should have, exactly like you said, of that Skiff Guard Lando. It's a great figure. It's perfect. It captures the likeness. It's beautiful aesthetics. There's a nice sculpt there, perfectly proportioned. It's got the accessory you need. That's a perfect figure too. So in short, they're all perfect. I think as long as the aesthetics, are right, there's nothing that detracts from you. All, both figures, types of figures have their purpose and their role.
Need new t-shirts? Need new hoodies? Want a ton of stickers jammed into an envelope? Then hit up the Steele Wars merch store at merchostore.com or steelewars.com for classic fan t-shirts like Your Snoke Theory Sucked, I'm Ray's Parents, or Have You Seen Him? And the reprint of our Chicago Sports Reference t-shirt and hoodie is about to start shipping. All prints are screen printed on the highest quality ring spun tube t-shirts, so your t-shirt will last for ages and the print won't wash off. And all purchases go to support the ongoing production of the Steele Wars podcast. And this little dude that wants to talk on the ad. So listen to the happy pleas of a 9-month-old boy and check out merchostore.com or steelewars.com. Good work, Harry. I think you got him on that one. Top stuff. Now, before we have to talk about this book because it is just amazing. But this has been my pitch. I'm sure I've bugged you about this in the early years, but this is my go-to Comic-Con question. Like before I had a podcast and they do the Q&A, I'd line up because I'm like, I'm doing the question again. I don't care. My wish, which would get me, I'd be straight over it, is, and they got close. I got fooled. I got April Fool tricked that they were going to do this, is to bring out retro style figures of prequel and sequel characters. So I want a vinyl caped Qui-Gon. I want all of it. Do you know what I mean? I want, it'd be so good. And then they bring out, like, I got these tweets from Toy Fair. Someone's like, that was like at the press, they're doing what you want, Steele, finally. And I'm like, yes. And then the photos come out and they've just re-brought out the figures that I've got back there, and then the Tarkin figure, which is
Tarkin.
Like that is like, you're getting very close to the dream. Like, I don't want, if you bring out this telescoping lightsaber Darth Maul figure and I have to buy Star Wars Trivial Pursuit to get it, there'll be hell to pay. None of these boxing games. But is that an idea that you think would work? Validate me or shut me down.
For the telescoping lightsaber figure?
Just to bring out vintage retro style figure. Like, I want bad figures.
They are. They're bringing them out. So the Tarkin is a good example. So let me give you a few figures that were never made in the Kenner line when we were kids that should have existed. Grand Moff Tarkin, right? Now he exists. So, and you've reminded me, I need to go find mine. I still haven't found that one. I can't wait to get it. Rebel Fleet Trooper, those troopers that get mown down. A sand trooper.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what I'm talking, like, that's when I say, like, just before the Phantom Menace, that's when it was its best. When those figures came out, I remember seeing that Rebel Fleet Trooper in Toys R Us, and it was just like, it happened. It exists.
Happened, but the proportions are bad. But anyway, but you're right. Now I'm getting fangry. No. So I love the simple designs too. So but then again, I'm a committed fan. I kind of like it all. I see the reason for existence for everything. And for me, it's more about the aesthetics. So there's a certain aesthetic and charm to the Kenner figures that reminds me of my youth. It, reminds me of growing up playing, with Star Wars figures, a key part of my childhood. So I like those, and I want to see new figures. Like the ones that are re-releases, they don't have a room in my collection. I've already got a Luke, I've already got the other characters, but the new ones, I'd say bring them on. I like those. One question fans always have is, well, those figures are taking away resources from something else that Hasbro could be doing. We want this over here. We want more vintage figures. We want, more 6-inch figures or something like that. So it's always a question for, I think for Hasbro, where are they going to put their resources? And is that paying, is that paying off for them? But that's something that they, will decide on a year by year basis. But
it's weird. It's just sort of hit me that the Star Wars toy license is the core problem of Star Wars. Like, do you know what I mean? Because people watch Star Wars when they're little, and then as they grow, like, some people want Star Wars to grow up with them. Like, they want it to get more mature as they get more mature. And I just want to feel 10. Do you know what I mean? I don't need the gritty reboot. It was gritty to begin with, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that it's because I'm sure you have collectors that want, they want the figures to grow up with them. And then you've got people like me that's just like, I just want vinyl caped Kylo Ren, guys. That would be awesome.
So you're admitting, like, you like the feeling that you had when you were 10 years old. Other people want the line to mature with them.
Yeah.
G.I. Joe is another good example of a line that has really evolved, and those sculpts have become incredible, and the articulation, and the line has become like darker but more reflective of things that happened in the last films. But there's a standard of articulation now that's been reset. Fans really, for the most part, don't want to see it go backwards. In Star Wars, I think there are some fans who welcome that simplicity because it reminds them of their childhood. The day may come with G.I. Joe where people are asking for retro figures like that as well. But Star Wars is different because that 5-point articulation really defined that format. You didn't need more. And as kids, we didn't we didn't realize all the articulation that we were missing because those figures satisfied, a perfect need. So, I say welcome it, but it does. It is kind of interesting that now there are three aesthetics out there for figures. There's those retro figures. There's the 5-point articulation figures like in the tube that they have now.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the vintage figures, the high articulation. It could be confusing for a kid new to the saga to kind of come into the store and have to pick and choose which one they want because, a lot of parents might steer them towards, the more deluxe figure.
That's the sort of thing. I look at the aisle and I'm like, if I was a kid, like what would I gravitate to, sort of thing?
Yeah.
And okay, before we get to the book, I just want you to just, I'm going to tell you a claim. Okay. And then I want your reaction. That Toys R Us closed down because Star Wars figures weren't selling.
A claim?
A claim. It might be a very popular claim on youtube.com. And
oh, no kidding.
Like I've got a background in retail, right? So I sort of love all this stuff. But I do like that these stores, how these giant shops that shut down because of this one toy line.
No, not at all.
They didn't give it more. If it was that crucial to the business,
yeah,
why was it only 3 meters in the store?
Yeah,
you need to expand that. If you've got a clothing shop and shoes are keeping you in business,
yeah,
you widen the shoe wall.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, Toys R Us was right. They gave a lot of their prominent feature. They created a Star Wars feature shop right there, in the front left of most stores. Toys R Us knew that, Star Wars was a moneymaker for them, but no, that's not, it's not true that, Star Wars figures weren't selling and the chain had to shut down. There were a lot, bigger problems going on than that. So as much as fans want to believe that it was all about Star Wars figures were probably helping Toys R Us stay alive a lot longer than they otherwise might have.
Well, Derryl, when you're a bit fangry, you can say some silly things.
Exactly. Fangry.
All right. Now, if there's one thing I do collect, and that is sweet Star Wars books. That is one of my... Like a sweet Star Wars book rekindled my love of Star Wars. The Steve Sansweet's concept screen to collectible. I got that. It was a handbook on how to be a fan, what lore to pass on, Blue Snaggletooth, the whole, like it sort of gave you the key things you needed to bore people relentlessly with Star Wars facts, right? And I always thank Stephen for that. You have got a Kickstarter, which it's kind of, it's still, we can make it better, but you're 3 times the goal. So
three times and working its way towards 4 times the goal, which is absolutely incredible. So we don't know where it will end up, but the response. So first of all, the book is called Star Wars, the Vintage Collection Archive Edition. It is a tribute to the Vintage Collection, which is a line that I helped launch at Hasbro in 2010. It actually has its roots in several series that preceded that. But the idea is, this collection is about, in that original Kenner packaging, delivering the most premium version of those figures in 3 3/4 format that will ever exist. And it has become, when we relaunched the Vintage Collection in 2010, our agreement with Lucasfilm was that we will go beyond the original trilogy to cover the entirety of Star Wars. Everything was fair game. The prequel trilogy, we filtered in expanded universe characters, and it really covered the best that Star Wars had to offer, with the best format of those characters on the best visual card back, the visual packaging that ever existed for any toy. And that's what the Vintage Collection is about. So our book is a 300-page hardbound, full premium tribute to this amazing line, and it is going to be an amazing book. So the fans have responded to your point. They funded our Kickstarter in less than a day, and since then have been responding to the stretch goals, that we've kind of added successfully to keep rewarding fans. And so we keep adding, very cool stretch goals. So the next one I think that'll be unlocked is if we hit $175,000, it'll be a series of aluminum coins for some undone things in the line. So that's the next one that's in our sites right now. So things like Jabba the Hutt, a Jabba coin, a Slave One coin, and a Katana sail barge coin. So if we hit that goal, we're going to produce these coins in a nice little coin holder and just give those to everybody who buys a book. So that's the next one.
Well, my pet peeve about Kickstarters is when they don't have the thing that they're raising money for as one of the rewards. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, like I've had like people hit me up about stuff and it's like, oh, we're raising money to do this. I'm like, you've got to make one of the rewards the thing. Like, do you know what I mean? Just because that's like, as soon as I got sent this, I was like, the book better be one of the rewards. It was the first thing I checked. I was like, if the book's not one of the rewards, I don't know how I'm going to handle this. But because I just want to buy the book. Like with all these things, people send me stuff. It's normally fan film and films and it's just like, just tell me that I'm going to get a copy of the book. Let's let me buy the book now and send it to me when you're done. And that is, it seems to be that's an untapped. Like that doesn't have a limit on it because some of these.
No. You're right. So that's just the basic, backer reward you can get is the book. It's $60. You can get a signed one for, with a nameplate that I'll sign with the collaborators. In fact, Sansweet will sign that too. I should talk about my collaborators for a second, but the $75 reward is the signed version. You get that, you're getting the book, and all these stretch goals we have are just things that we've created as a thank you because this campaign, I'll be honest, it's been ridiculous. When we first kind of set out to say, like, if we're going to do this book, where do we need to kind of be funded to do it? And we looked against all of the other fan publishing efforts that had been done on Kickstarter and said, well, we could fall between this one and this one, which have been the successfully funded ones. We've blown through every metric. But to keep fans engaged and to, maybe there's always the thing about Kickstarter, there are people who are on the sidelines and they want to wait or they want to, see something else to come in. So we've given ourselves, given the fans stretch goals, which also stretch us too. We've said, one of the ones that was just funded was Kim Simmons, the legendary photographer from Hasbro, from Kenner, who created the iconic posters defining, our time collecting 3 3/4 figures when we were kids. He created the iconic yellow backdrop poster. And then the one that was mailed out to some members of the club, the more Return of the Jedi era one. He was the photographer behind the lens on these. We've commissioned him to go back, and we're going to just send a recreation using vintage figures of that legendary poster to just all backers. And if we hit that stretch goal with the coins at 175, every backer of a book who gets a book will just get the coins. So we kind of keep, to your point, you back the book, but you get everything else. And we're just kind of layering that on top.
Well,
so we're thanking the fans for the incredible support by just doing more, super cool things that we can do because now fans have shown, their enthusiasm behind the project.
Being a Star Wars child of the 80s, action figures in front of a yellow or a blue background it gets me emotional. And I always wondered, like on the back of the Hasbro, of the Kenner cards, they'd have all the figures photographed and they'd always, the 42 back, whatever. And I could never work out how they well, on those angles. But on your Kickstarter, there's a photo of Kim Simmons, and he's taking photos for the new book with the vintage collection, and you can actually see how he tears. There's like fabric over. Oh, that I just seeing that is unlocked. I wish I could go back and tell me how they did that, because I was like, how do they? It doesn't seem natural the way they're all. And it was. I couldn't imagine that they'd be like moved around like they would be now.
So Kim built all that. Those were all what we would say today practical effects, right?
Yes.
So Kim's shooting it practically, and for the for the mail out one, he's got a lot of the original elements of the set, like the tree, the tree parts and the sand and things like that. He still has all those. So he's going to put them all back together. So he's figuring out how big the stage is and how many tiers he needs to fit all the figures in. So we've given him all the figures. So it'll be all, 154 that he's going to have to lay out, I think is the number.
That's what I was going to ask, how many vintage figures. So this book is kind of like an unofficial sequel to Steve Sansweet did the action figure archive.
Yep. The action figure archive in '99. Yep.
Which I again, Steve Sansweet book, I'm all over it. Now, it's not just going to be photographs of the figure, which is actually a pretty good, especially for someone that did decide to live off other people's spending to enjoy collectibles. Like just like look at their stuff and all that stuff. So there's tons of like detailed photos, and that Sansweet book, when I was trying to get my figures back together with their weapons, it was a very invaluable. It was a very, quite a good resource. But you're also going to talk to designers and marketers and people behind the scenes. So it's not like, it's not just going to be photos. There's going to be like tons of sort of in-depth behind the scenes stories and my favorite, unproduced items.
Yes, we're going to do this. So right now, my role on the team. So let me mention my collaborators. My two partners in our company, it's called Blue Milk. So Blue Milk, our vision is to produce premium products for fans. And specifically in this case, it's going to be a premium book celebrating the vintage collection. So we're all about giving fans the information they need for their collecting to complete their collection, taking the spiritual, we're the spiritual successor to what Steve was doing with his books. So we're kind of taking that baton and carrying that on. So my collaborators are D. Martin Myatt, and everybody should know, if they've gone to rebelscum.com, they've seen D. Martin, we call him Dave's work. He's the lead photographer and the lead content curator for Rebel Scum and Cool Toy Review. And then my other collaborator, my other partner in Blue Milk, is Rich Alott. And Rich is a longtime fan as well of Star Wars. And he was actually a marketing manager for Tamashii Nations for years. So has also been core involved in fandom on both sides, on the corporate side and on the fan side. They came to me with a vision of what this book would be, and I signed on board once I saw their kind of layout, which is inspired by Steve's 1999 book, the archive book that you talked about. The goal here is a clean, crisp presentation of every figure, and we want to devote one single page to every figure to cover the card that it comes on. A beautiful picture of the card, beautiful picture of the figure, the accessories, crisp and clear, so you can complete your collection like you talked about, and all the information you would need, like the variations that might have been produced for that figure. And then I'm writing the text to accompany it, which is the inside story on the creation of that figure. Like, why did we pick this figure over another figure? The design aspect of this, any particular challenging things. It's my goal to document, which people don't know, the designer, the sculptor, and the packaging artist, the packaging designer for each of these, because the package for the vintage collection is so important. But what people don't know is how difficult it was to either recreate those original Kenner scenes because those Kenner scenes were all heavily doctored themselves, or how difficult it was to find a current image that kind of matched the tonality we're going for. And, luckily, a lot of the designers are, they're super willing to talk. I'm in the middle of a 2-part interview, as a matter of fact, with Dave Reeves, who now works at Boss Fight Studios, who was the package designer for pretty much the entire vintage run when I was there, the vintage collection run. And we've started to talk, gone figure by figure, and he's filling me in on why he did this selection, what he had to do to make this image, work, and had stories that I just didn't even know, like how difficult it was, or the choices he had to make to put something in people's hands that felt like it was a new, a contiguous part of the vintage collection. So we were looking for the voices like that really informs the choice. And I think what makes this book unique is that everybody we've interviewed was so passionate about their craft that, when I look back at my time at Hasbro, it was an amazing time. Those 10 years were great. In particular, those years were phenomenal years on Star Wars, where I was in the trenches with a team of people who cared so deeply about what they were doing. It was an amazing time. I've never experienced anything like it, because the team was so committed to their craft, whether it's Mark Boudreau as a designer, Dave Reeves in packaging, Brian Parrish and Eric Aranya, who was also at Boss Fight, who did, most of the basic figures that were ever done. And Brian Merton, who designed almost all the exclusives. It's like every one of these guys remembers the details of the creation of these sets, because we knew it was special at the time, what we were doing, and we were all committed. It was such a well-oiled team. My experiences were so phenomenal that, I feel it's my desire, my job is to bring their stories to fans everywhere behind the creation of this, this magic line.
Now, with the pledges, there's the basic one. If you just want to help out, there's like a $5 or more pledge, and the Force will be with you. Oh, and your name will appear in the contributor page in the book for $5.
Yeah.
Oh, I could.
Yeah, we'll put it in there.
I'm thinking of ways to take advantage of that. like do a couple so it spells out some word, or
you do a whole bunch of them.
Yeah. But these the juicy ones that I like, it's just like pledge $60 or more, and you'll get one printed copy of the book. So for me, it's like, do you want to make sure this book's going to happen? Is it worth $60? And then this is a pretty cool one. For $75 or more, you can get a signed version from yourself and all the contributors, including Steve Sansweet.
Yes.
But this one is interesting. I know a few people that might be upgrading to this one. Pledge 200 or more, and it's the Ultimate Bookbacker 2. And you get a recreation or a reinterpretation of that Kenner yellow-backed Collect Them All poster with all the vintage collection figures by Kim Simmons.
That's right.
I get a feeling that poster could end up being worth a lot.
It's a fantastic poster. This is the yellow backed poster we were talking about. Actually, Kim has the original cloth that he used to shoot the original. That will be the backdrop on the for the photo. The Ultimate Backer includes that, plus we're doing a recreation of the original Kenner vinyl carry case. It's not vinyl, but it looks just like that. It has the feel of it. It's going to be on like a premium chipboard slipcase with a magnetic clasp for the for the hinge.
Okay, if people aren't watching,
it's amazing.
If people aren't watching the YouTube video version, you missed. I scrolled down to see this and I realized what it was, and my mouth's just been open for about 15 seconds as I was like, that's a very good slipcase. That is awesome.
It's incredible. Both the poster and the slipcase are, absolutely. I can't believe that we're able to produce these to this kind of quantity. They're going to be such awesome accompaniments to the book itself. So it's just fantastic.
Now, I should point out maybe my favorite pledge for my Australian brethren. This is my favorite pledge because too long have we been left out in the cold by releases and shipping and stuff like that. But if you pledge $240 or more, hear me out, guys. I can already, in my head, I'm already picturing listeners that like Chris Fresh, this angry, he's fangry. He's he's in Melbourne being all fangry about stuff. He'll be flipping his lip. But hear me out. For $240, you get 4 copies of the book, which again, don't get fangry. We know you only need 1. Maybe 2 if you're a real sicko. Who knows? We're not gonna vouch for that. But if you've got 3 other collecting friends and you all want a book, because shipping stuff like it's way cheaper per book to ship 4 at once. And I did listen to you get interviewed on another podcast about this, and I was very impressed with this, that you designed the size of the book to fit in a mailer very well. I was like, that's
right.
That is good. You're an experienced group of guys to do it that way around. That's right. That was beautiful. But so if you are international and you want to get your hands on this, and you can team up with 3 other people, then $300, 4 books, 4 names in the book. Yep. I just want to I'm doing the name thing just to troll people. They have to read my name. They don't have a choice.
Well, I mean, you're right. The individual cost to send something internationally is very high. We've realized that. So for one book, I'm looking at the drop down menu right now just for Australia for one book. It's quite expensive, but it's more worthwhile if you can find several collectors to kind of team up and do kind of a group purchase. It really makes the shipping, come down a lot less. So that's why we put that. The bundle out there. We've been very sensitive to fans' comments. There have been a number of them just about the cost to fulfill it to some further destinations in the world. And there's a lot of fans in Australia. There's a lot of fans, in the EU. And so our hope is that, you can get like-minded fans together, jump in on the bundle, and then, like you say, get the sign, could get the signed one, and then, really get those shipping costs down. So it's something that has, we've twisted night and day on this, because our ultimate goal is we want to get these books in the hands of fans who want them, everywhere without barriers. But unfortunately, sometimes the postal system, especially U.S. postage, is it's just gone up so much. There's just no way to get around it. So we try to create ways around it as much as possible. Our hope is that by the time people do get the book in their hands, they'll feel it's completely worthwhile. That all the effort and care and love that went into it is reflected on the on the pages when they do get it in their hands.
Well, I have to say, with all this stuff, like the presentation of the Kickstarter and the book and the goals and the pledges and stuff, I don't know, it's just very well thought out, I think. So I'm really excited about this. I don't even have a hint of fangriness about this, except that I have to wait to December. And but I'll just run over. This is the hard tacks of the book. It's deluxe hardcover, 9.25, 11.5 inches. Again, for my friends in Australia, that's 23.5 centimeters by almost 30 centimeters. Professionally designed layout with easy-to-use reference guide using high-resolution photos and premium quality paper. Covers the vintage collection, action figures, creatures, vehicles, and play sets.
Everything.
Chapter breaks with full-page width photos inspired by Kenner era packaging.
Yeah, so let me talk about that for a second. The chapter breaks are amazing in themselves because we have worked with many phenomenal fan photographers out there. Sergeant Bananas and others. Stephen Hayford will be doing some of these. People may recognize these names from people who are using action figures as their actors and producing amazing photography, sets, designs, everything. Those will be sourcing those as the chapter break. So as you turn from one chapter to another, say from the vintage original trilogy chapter, almost that's like the prequel to the vintage collection, going into the vintage collection, you'll see a beautiful picture using the vintage collection figures in action. One of the stretch goals we've already unlocked is we'll be taking those chapter breaks and presenting them in a mini folio, because those are works of art themselves that deserve to be celebrated, kind of unadorned. So we'll be taking those photos and including them in a little folio to everybody who backs a book. That's already been unlocked, but those chapter breaks are another example of the community that's been behind getting this book created. So not only are fans the community that is helping get it created because they've backed it, we're also sourcing content from the fans as well in terms of these chapter breaks. And so as Blue Milk goes on, and we hope that we'll be able to do more books in the future that will continue on, this kind of collaboration, I think, is amazing, because we get fans actually helping create the content that's inside.
How many was this? One backer. I like this one. Pledge $5,000 or more. Executive producer.
Oh, what a backer! What a backer this is too.
And
that is, yeah.
And one of the more notable things you get in this already taken pledge is you don't just get photos. They'll send you the sail barge.
We're probably going to drive the sail barge.
Really?
Yep. To this particular fan who backed this and was so enthusiastic about the project and really believed in the project that they wanted to see it unlocked and backed it with ferocity. So this is a very special one for us. So we're going to celebrate this one in a very special way. So
that's awesome.
I won't say anything more about that right now, but this fan gets the sail barge, they get the vinyl case slipcover, many copies of the book. It's a fantastic pledge. So thank you to our backer, the executive producer backer.
The EP, very cool.
Yep.
Now, do you have plans to have this sold at retail later on, or a different sort of maybe slimmed down version of it, or?
So we haven't really talked about anything beyond just delivering the book and fulfilling the book here. Through the Kickstarter. There are probably people who are going to become collectors or who just won't have heard of it, a year from now. Just like there are people now who didn't hear about the Katana sail barge, as much publicity as that got, through HasLab. There are people who said, "What? How does this exist? I didn't know about it." It's like, well, for various reasons, kind of people, or they come back into collecting. So there will be people, beyond the Kickstarter who I'm sure will need a book. We haven't figured out how to best deliver that to them yet, but I'm sure down the road there'll probably be a solution for that. So, but right now the focus is on the Kickstarter and all this is the thing, as we've added stretch goals, it's pretty amazing what you get. So any backer right now who orders the book, say at the $60 level, will get the art folio, will get the Kim Simmons, we'll get this, the Kim Simmons Star Wars is Forever mail away poster. And if we get to the coin level, you'll get the coins. You just get that for free. That won't be available anywhere else, outside of Kickstarter. So, those are substantial rewards for anybody who's on the fence now or who wants to jump in on the Kickstarter or get it as a gift.
I will give people a hint. The thing with these collecting books is they're purchased by collectors. And so they tend to go up in price.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Wow.
So I would get in on this.
That is true. I will echo that. I've got a few myself, the Kellerman archives and things like this that are core foundations. So, I will or will not. I won't speculate on the future value of the, Star Wars, the Vintage Collection Archive Edition. But thank you, Steele, for your support of the value it appears to be now. So
I see this guy, this executive producer that put in $5,000. He's getting a bunch of books in a sail barge. He could hit eBay with a profit by the end of this. You know that, don't you? He could. He's not all benevolent. He's got a good strategy. I don't know if you heard about Mike Pappas. This is a very dodgy friend of the podcast. I'm not sure if he's around this now. This is going to be linked on all. If you're on the podcast, if you're on the site, or if you're on YouTube, there's a link directly under whatever content you are consuming now to get to it. What's the easiest way for Googlers? It's just, is there a website, or is it just go straight to Kickstarter and search for Star Wars?
You can go to Kickstarter and search. You can just put in Star Wars Vintage and it'll pop up right to the top. You can also go to our website. So our website, it's easy to remember. It's Blue Milk, where the dot is on the in between the Blue MI and the LK. So that's our website domain. It's bluemi.lk, and you'll find all of the information about the book there. So you can go there and also check back there for updates. Most of the updates will come through the Kickstarter, but we will put some content on Blue Milk after the campaign ends. There's 8 days to go as we record this, and so there's an opportunity to jump in, and you can go at it from there. But we'll have plenty of updates as we progress. To let fans know how we're doing. Our goal is to get this in everybody's hands by the holiday this year. So we want to time it up to all the excitement that's going to happen, before episode 9, to really try and get this in everybody's hands as the ultimate celebration of everything that's happening this fall. There's so much exciting Star Wars stuff happening. We just want to be part of that.
Now, for those that want to rewind about 30 seconds, when Derryl said there's 8 days to go as we record this, that's him like passive aggressively telling me, don't mess about. Get this episode up. Just babies can look after themselves. It's all good, but we will get it up as soon as possible. Again, as I said, I'm a huge fan of toys, of course, but like sweet Star Wars resource books. I think I really love them because I didn't know really anyone that was into Star Wars, like the way I was back home, and just having those books, you could just, I don't know, just read stories from other people that super work. Now, Derryl, you have been extremely generous with your time. For those that are watching on YouTube, you can see that Derryl's room has darkened quite a bit since we started this. I'm on Pacific time. I'm still getting a tan through my front window here.
I've just enjoyed my time talking to you. I can get up and turn on the lights, but you're right. We should probably wrap it up.
Can I just stretch the friendship? A stretch goal. This is a stretch goal for the podcast, guys. And just get a couple of broad Star Wars toy questions out of the way. What's your favorite Star Wars toy that you have been involved with?
Oh, wow. Getting the big Millennium Falcon done is a highlight, but I would have to say I'm most proud of the Build-A-Droid line that I helped usher in for a couple of reasons. It was phenomenal. This ran in our Legacy collection from 2008 to 2011. We did years of awesome droids that never would have existed without that, but it was inspired by my love of the original Droid Factory, Kenner Droid Factory. And I look at that with pride because it was logistically very difficult to do, but I loved it. Secondarily, I got to work very closely with the Disney Parks team on the Build-A-Droid experience at the park. They built that out as a direct result of what we had done. Same thing with the Build Your Own Lightsaber experience, which has now become, such a core part of Galaxy's Edge. So those highlights to me, doing these kind of buildable experiences, have translated to the real experiences at the park. And that's validation, of those ideas, those original ideas actually that Kenner had, that were all inspired by that. So, so those are things I'm most proud of, I think, my time there.
Were you ever shocked by how popular a certain figure was?
Well, there's all kinds of degrees of that. Darth Vader by far was for many years the most popular character that we would do, and it seemed like we could sell an endless number of Darth Vaders. Like the kids of the world they could never have enough Darth Vaders. So that was validation of just the power of Star Wars. But other characters that we would do would be off the charts, like Mara Jade. Characters from the expanded universe that were much beloved that we would do had incredible popularity, even though you might say, well, that's a small piece of fandom off to the side, never in the movies. But it just underscores that there are beloved characters and Star Wars fans hold in their heart that even these off-world series, they embrace those characters.
Yeah, I found those when they came out. Like, I'm fascinated with how Star Wars works with people's heads and their emotions and how they relate to it and stuff. But I feel like those figures were like a validation of being into those characters, and now they seemed realer. That they got a figure, yeah. And it's like,
yes,
it's not in a movie or whatever, but it's got this bit. Like, that's how important this like, it's true. This is an important character.
I have the exact same belief. Like, I want to see it in physical form. And I'm a big fan of, well, we've talked about the Cantina aliens. I'm a big fan of Rebel pilots too. So every Rebel pilot in all those squadrons, even the ones you never got to, hear who they were, you just, the call sign, Red 1, Red 2, all of these guys who gave their lives, like, you may have seen them in the hangar just briefly on a comm screen. I want to see those guys because they're made real to me when they're on my shelf. And there's a validation. It becomes physical. It becomes real. Our love and affection for that thing that we have this emotional attachment about. When you finally get that figure in your hand, you're right. And it's part of the bigger Star Wars fabric. There's something very important about that. And that's why fans have, their undone favorites that, they want to see done. So
when or what was when did a product get released that the fans called out for and you were just like, that's it, I'm not listening to the fans anymore, this thing is it's on pegs everywhere, it's not working out? I've got a guess, but
you know what it is. So okay, we're gonna write down our guesses and then we're gonna reveal them. No. So by far it's Wilro Hood. Do you know Wilro Hood? Is this the one you were thinking of?
It was not. It was not.
Oh, I can't wait to hear yours. But Wilro Hood they call him the ice cream maker guy.
Yes.
He's become iconic for his obscurity now. It's this guy in an orange jumpsuit who runs through the halls of Cloud City, Bespin, in Empire Strikes Back. And he's holding this white thing, which was just an ice cream maker they grabbed off the shelf and just gave to the guy. He's become iconic in his obscurity, and I think fans champion the idea that they could get anything created when they voted in one of the fans' votes to do Wilro Hood. So we did Wilro Hood, but there weren't as many fans who really wanted to buy Wilro Hood as seemed to vote for Wilro Hood. So he was a bit of a peg warmer. And that goes to show that there are fans vote figures or figures that fans want that, really have potential. And there are some that just are a force of will sometimes just to get through, but you have to be careful of those because they could really damage you if you over-release figures like that.
Yeah.
And Wilro Hood, we over-released.
I was going to guess it was, I might mispronounce her name, Gardenian or Guardian or the dancer, the multiple breasted.
Yarna Del Gargan?
Yeah, Gargan. Yeah.
Yarna, we released Yarna, but we didn't go long, what we call go long on Yarna, right? We didn't over-release her. We wanted to be very careful on Yarna, and she never really was a problem. I don't know if where you lived, you saw a lot of them gather on the pegs, but we were very careful not to over-release her. She was a what we would call more of a chase figure. She was in one wave and then kind of done, so we wouldn't actually release her. And that's the science to the art of Star Wars figures is actually, and this is what I love doing for so many years, which is actually trying to call with accuracy how many of each figure we were going to make, so they would sell through and we could get to the next wave without a problem. It's when you have figures pile up on the pegs that you can't get to the next wave and everything kind of backs up. It's like a series of dominoes that just start falling. So, and that's an inevitable problem when you have what we call a wave-driven line like Star Wars after a period of time. But the real science was in trying to really get the numbers right to make sure that things just keep flowing instead of backing up at retail.
The science of fun.
Yeah. And we did it so fans wouldn't get fangry.
An awesome way to wrap up, Derryl. It's been an absolute pleasure. You've been so generous with your time. And
likewise, Steele.
Yeah, the book is like, I'm pumped for it. I am.
Thank you.
I am Christmas presenting. I've been a good boy so far. So I'm hooking myself up with this bad boy. I'm very excited. Now, one thing before you go is we always want to know what people are looking forward to most in Star Wars. There's untold content coming. There's TV shows, there's cartoons, there's movies. What's got your attention, Derryl?
Well, I was at Celebration and was able to get into the Mandalorian panel, and I was so excited by what I saw. I'm a big fan of kind of the spaghetti westerns, and I think this is one thing that Dave Filoni has it's infused in this. Big fan of the Mandalorians. I can't wait to see kind of what new small stories we're going to get in the universe. Like, we've had big stories on the big screen. I'm looking forward to the small stories of the people who live in these backwater towns and make that work. You don't know what the series will be like, but I'm hoping we get that slice of life. And from what we've seen, it looks like it will have that. So we'll be seeing some new small stories, and that's really what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. Even that clip they showed of them with the chits, or they're talking about bounties and all that. Like, it was like, oh, that's like this little lifestyle that I've never even thought about in Star Wars. It's very interesting.
It's the economics. Like, how can I afford to live? My job is to hunt people. There's a certain price below which it's not worth it. But man, I've got to put fuel in my ship, and I've got to eat. So I'll take that. I don't like what you're paying, but I've got to take it to live. That's the awesome 99.9% of the Star Wars galaxy, and I can't wait to see that. How about you? What are you excited about?
I'm the Rise of Skywalker. I'm Luke Skywalker guy. I'm a saga guy, and Mandalorian looks awesome, and the thought of I'm so looking forward to watching Star Wars and every week. Like, that's just like, I know we have the animation, but like, I've always been jealous of like especially from like people are gonna just shake their heads and just go classic Steele, but from a content point of view, to like be able to do like a TV show review each week and then look at the trailer for, like, because I listen to all like the Lost podcasts and all those shows, and not that I'm into those shows, like Talking Dead, and like all the having that weekly thing to talk about. I'm really excited for that. But yeah, the to find out how the story ends is I like anything that impresses 7-year-old me. Do you know what I mean? That's how I try to live my life, is by impressing 7-year-old me. And the fact that there's a film coming out called The Rise of Skywalker it's going to be good, or it might not be. But I think so. This is the thing with me, is it's the experience. Like, I was thinking about the other day that The Force Awakens could have been horrible, but I had the best year of my life in the lead up to it. So I sort of, like, I didn't like that 2 hours, but the other 364 days or whatever was like, it was bliss. I had so much fun. So I just like just keep fun coming, and not put out so much that it's not an event. Like, I want I need my event Star Wars. Keep it event. And for those that enjoy tweeting and liking and Instagramming, are you or Blue Milk on social media?
Blue Milk, yep. We're on all social media. You can find us on Instagram, less on Facebook, and mostly Instagram is where we're on. So Blue Milk, you can follow us. I post occasionally. My coworkers, post a little bit more. D. Martin Myatt and Rich a lot. So you can find us, but Blue Milk is a good way to follow us.
Awesome. Derryl, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks to everyone for listening, and may that force be with you.